Let's look at what it means. Now, in earlier sections, if I saw square root of negative, I'd say not real. Imaginary numbers are not real, but now we can break them down as if we can treat them like just tack an I on it. If I want to break this down, what I would do, I'm going to break this down as negative 1 times 7 now. Square root of negative 1 is I root 7. It's common that 7 isn't going to break down. That I can be treated like a coefficient, just like a number would. Well, let's look at if I had square root of negative 16. This one I'm actually going to break down as square root of 16, square root of negative 1, because the square root of 16 is 4, square root of 1 is I. The big difference here is the 16 could break down. Any numerical coefficients go in front. I can be treated like a coefficient and would typically go in front of a radical. Radicals, anything that's left over underneath, is stuck going into the back. Well, what if I had a negative square root of negative 13? As bad as we want to say those negatives cancel, we showed earlier that they do not. This means negative 1 times, I could break this up as, remember the moral of the story. When I have a negative underneath, throw an I on it. When I have a negative underneath, throw an I on it. When I have a negative underneath, throw an I on it. When we recognize these later, we will call them not real, but if we need to break it down, just throw an I on it and move on. That would break up as negative 1 times 13. 13 is stuck underneath because it doesn't break down. If it did, it'd go out in front. But times negative 1 means negative I root 13. Well, again, we kind of call these pause play type effects. When we're doing some examples later, when we see these in the middle of equations we need to solve, or the quadratic equation, or some of these other problems, what I need to do is just be prepared to break it down. Negative 1 times square root of, I'm actually going to put 3 square root symbols here, because 50 can break down as, well, I could say 5 and 10, but that's not going to be helpful for me because neither of them are squares. 25 and 2 is the one that's going to be helpful, so I'm going to actually put the 25 way out front, the 2 as what's going to be stuck underneath. But remember, that gives me a positive 50. I also want to include the negative 1, because if I had square root of 25 times negative 1 times 2, what happens is that still gives me my negative 50, but let's look at what's going on. Negative 1 times, here's why I put the 25 in front, I get a 5. Here's why I put the negative 1 in the middle, because that's my I. Here's why I put the root 2 at the end, because it doesn't break down. Negative 1 times 5 times I times root 2, negative 5 I root 2. Once again, negatives always go in the very front. Numerical coefficients would go after the sign, but still in front of the I, but the I still goes in front of the radical. The radical is what we will always put at the end.